Welcome everybody to another real-time session on librarian.support. Today we have a great colleague and speaker and just wonderful human being, but we'll get into a moment, in a moment. I'll have the wonderful human being wait for a moment. Just to give you some quick updates, once again, the librarian.support website is still there and we're adding resources. If you have resources you'd like to add, whether they're webinars and real-time sessions you want to promote, or you're a contractor or a freelancer as part of this and you want to get listed within that, we know you're a vital and important part of the ecosystem. I recommend that you do that. We have information not only about these sessions that we're doing in real time, but for example, I believe today we have another of the Augusta Baker lecture series that's being made available to the public on diversity, so please check that out, and we'll put up links to other things that are going on in real time. So we really appreciate your support, and we should appreciate the support of our partner in all of this, which is Public Library 2030, which is doing a fabulous job of connecting and pushing forward and advancing public libraries in the EU. So thanks to them for all of their support and work on as well. So we've been spending a good amount of time this month, and we're going through the end of this month, and it looks like we'll probably even push in through May, and may just keep going if these are useful, talking about not just the crisis and crisis management, which was how we began, but really what does the library look like after this is done, as well as what's on there. When I began looking around for things that we can do, things that we can participate, things that we can highlight, and looking at what libraries were doing in response to what was happening, one of the things that struck me as really heartwarming and interesting and fabulous is that in many ways, when we closed our physical buildings and we left the Wi-Fi on, we really in some ways went back to some pretty core services for libraries. We talk about being a community and a community hub, and I think that is central to all the things we've done. But clearly in a stay-at-home environment and social distancing environment, the idea of how do we support a community in more ways than simply a physical space became more and more important. We obviously have electronic lending. We have lots of people putting out collections and books and hooplas and libbies and overdrives and such. We've seen the reference and questions spike as information's gone up. We've seen use of databases go up as well. But one of the things that I just absolutely am in love with, and I think our guest today smiles because she knows that I'm probably a little bit more smitten with the concept than I should be, but the idea that we really did return to things like story time. I've seen the idea implemented much in lots of different places. I've seen school libraries do it for their students. I've seen public libraries do it. I've seen authors do it. I've seen lots of folks who have really looked at this as a way of coming together around a virtual campfire, if you will, and talking and telling stories and sharing information. And that is, I think, some of the original social community interactions that libraries have been involved with for decades and decades. It raises some interesting questions about copyright. It raises some interesting questions about participation and access. But at the same time, it really does demonstrate a real need and quest for human connection beyond Zoom happy hours and privacy nightmares that they provide therein. So what my guest today, Valerie Byrd, is something of a force of nature, particularly in the state of South Carolina. When I was fortunate enough to hire her on 2 years ago now, I believe, I got a lovely emails, including from a former director of the School of Library and Information Science, Dan Barron, who just said, "Oh my God, you just did an amazing thing. Congratulations." I believe you were his student. Is that right? Okay, very good. So he's bragging on you, just to let you know he's still taking credit. And if you look at her resume, you begin to understand why. Just a little reading a little bit, but Valerie has been a school librarian in South Carolina for over 15 years. But within that 15 years working and teaching in a K-12 environment, she was selected as Teacher of the Year at both the schools she taught in. She was the past president of she is the past president of the South Carolina Association for School Librarians. And I just have to tell one more story, and then I will shut up in that conversation, which is So I'm an old white-beard, grumpy information science guy, and when we do job interviews and job applications for faculty positions in the academy, they tend to be these things where we bring someone in for a day or two, they talk to everyone, we go out to dinner, and then at some point they're asked to give the presentation. And the presentation is normally something along the lines of what's your research agenda, and they have lots of sigmas on them, and you can really clear, having been on both sides of this equation, you sort of ache and take a long time to worry about just how smart you can sound without losing the audience and putting them to sleep. Valerie has, I think, the most impressive job talk I have ever heard as part of those, my favorite job talk as part of those, and one that I will never be able to replicate. She actually did a version of Storytime. She did a read aloud where she walked through and she demonstrated how it worked, and then she talked about how she used Classroom, and it was brilliant. And once again, it was enough to make an old crusty white guy information professor's heart melt, in that I was kind of like, wait, this is gimmicky, wait, this is really important, wait, wow, this is cool. And so I just wanted to, set you up with that to say that one of the things that I have learned in this position from you and from others is that importance of the story, of the coming together and how we tell it, and the information is part of it. So welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much. My head, I don't know if it fits like in the screen of the computer now, but I'm great. We are getting a little stir crazy here at home, but we're healthy, and that's what's most important. So I'm doing great and just trying to continue working and sharing resources and just keep trucking on.
This is fabulous. By the way, if you are on Facebook, I hope there's a link in this, or if not, we'll get one out, which is as Library Goddess. She does story times. Is it every day? Is it?
It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's at 1 o'clock, and right now I'm kind of coining them as hot mess story times. I'm going to talk a lot about best practice and things that you should do during a story time, but then when you watch mine, I can't say that you're going to see a ton of that because mine stars an actual child. So that's kind of like where it all goes awry. But I will talk a little bit more about that. And I will add the link in the presentation. It's not there right now, but I'll add to it.
So back into the idea of sharing everything I know about this topic, because I'm loving, part of why I do this is so I can learn. But the two story time things that really stick out of my mind. One was a small suburban library, faith-filled-free library, and they talked about it at one point moving from story time as scheduled to pop-up story times, which is they would have a lot of kids, and once they figured out, hey, we have a critical mass here, the librarian would sort of wade into the crowd and say, hey, let's do and they do one, which I thought was fabulous. And the other one is a story. We worked on a project with the School of Education, or College of Education, and they have literacy experts and reading experts. And as part of that, they have workshops where they would talk to parents about the importance of reading and do a story time and demonstrated, on this page, this is what you would do, on this page, what you do. At the end of that, a parent with her infant came up to the professor who had just done that and said, could you tell me again on this page what you did? All right, on this one, can you tell me what you did? And it became pretty clear quickly that the mother couldn't read. Hey, Mom. And that what she was doing was that she really knew the importance of reading. She wanted to pass that on to her infant, but she didn't have the capability. And so it was so important that she was sitting there trying to memorize the impact. What that then turned into was a lovely, suddenly, let's help you read and connecting to resources. But to me, it's this compelling thing that is not just a nicety, but it is crucial and important to development. So if I'm going to shut up at this point, and because I know you've done a lot of thinking about this and you've prepared some remarks, so I'm going to sit back, if you're all right, and let you go through. Tell us a little bit about what we need to do and think about this.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And all of that that you shared is true. There are many places that always do like pop-up story times. They go to grocery stores, they go to laundromats. Libraries are really reaching out with read alouds in all kinds of different situations. So it is not surprising that now that we are all kind of stuck in our homes, that libraries are trying to think of different ways to get stories out there. So yes, we have, as librarians, have always kind of been eager to get story time out to as many people as we can, whether it's in person or virtually. And then when you mentioned about just the literacy implications, that's exactly true. When we have our parents who are learning how to speak English, or we have illiterate parents, the stories, the vocabulary, it helps them just as much as it helps their children. So story time and storytelling and words and reading, it is so important. And definitely the audio of all of that is amazingly important. But I'm going to go to my slides now, and first I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. Dr. Lankus did an awesome job, but just so that you know a little bit more about my background and who I am as a person. So I am a mom. You may have seen my 5-year-old just popped in here a moment ago, and she could be back. But I do have a 5-year-old. My background, so I was a school librarian for 15 years, but before that I have also worked at the public library as a children's librarian, a youth services librarian. I am the coordinator for Cocky's Reading Express, and that's something that we have at the University of South Carolina. That's the literacy outreach program for the University of South Carolina, and it's our mascot, who is a giant rooster. If you're not familiar, people love Cocky, and so we travel the entire state of South Carolina visiting children, visiting teachers and classrooms, and each visit we do read alouds, and then we give away books. We've been around for 15 years, and in that time, we've visited every county in South Carolina, and we've given away over 137 books to children. I am an instructor. I teach children's literature, so that is a undergraduate class we have at the University of South Carolina, and that's for pre-service teachers, so future classroom teachers. And then I teach children's materials, which is our graduate level version of that course, and that is for youth service librarians and school librarians and anyone who's interested in children's materials. Also, I am a PhD student in the Language and Literacy program at the University of South Carolina, and I haven't narrowed my focus yet for research, but it's probably going to be about reading aloud and literacy and words and the listening of words, and how that helps struggling readers, striving readers get the information they need to be successful. So that is just a little bit more about my background. I am on social media as Library Goddess. I have a Facebook page where I share a lot of information, and I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll include all of that information in the slides so that you can find me.
And then we'll make sure these slides are available with the archive as well.
Great. So I want to first just talk about the elephant in the room, because it's natural for us to want to do our programming online. Like immediately I thought about when it came, you know, when we all knew that we would be inside for a while or in our homes, I immediately thought, oh, I can do read alouds, I can do story time at home. Well, then you need to consider, of course, as librarians, this was my second thought, well, can I do that? We've seen there's school principals that read out loud on Facebook. There's teachers. A lot of times this kind of thing is being shared even before COVID, but it is not fair use in a normal time. So it's not really something that we do normally, but copyright it's been really interesting, I think, but because it's changing because of this pandemic. So I have been doing a lot of reading and researching about copyright with these read alouds, and I've learned some things. The first thing I've learned is it's very fluid, and you can kind of look at it in a bunch of different ways. I watched this webinar, and I have a link here, and it explains how copyright law, specifically fair use, permits many classroom and library read aloud activities to be translated to a digital environment. So right now, classroom teachers, they're not face-to-face with their students, and reading aloud is something that you do in the classroom multiple times a day. So that is definitely a translation of your normal classroom experience. So that is definitely fair use. If you're a public librarian, your story time where you are bringing in the public, you're bringing in those babies, toddlers, preschoolers, that is your normal everyday, and you cannot do it now. So it is fair use to translate that to a digital environment. So this webinar was really interesting and really kind of made me more comfortable with sharing these read alouds. And some best practice that I have gleaned from this webinar and others that I've seen, so any kind of story times that you do and you record during this pandemic, they need to be deleted. They can be deleted when the pandemic is over. Some publishers request that you remove it by a particular day. So just look at what the publisher says and when they want you to remove it. It's best practice to post it in a closed group. So on Facebook, for example, you can create a group and then have that closed and just invite people to come to your group, so then it's closed, or use your learning management software. So some schools, you know, like we have Blackboard here at the University of South Carolina. If maybe you have a Google Classroom environment that you're using, or Seesaw, there's a lot of different ways to share those to where it's closed. Some libraries, or most of the libraries actually, and I'm going to show you some that I think are doing a really great job, they're using unlisted YouTube playlists. So they're creating their story time, they're posting it on YouTube, it's unlisted, so you can't necessarily search for the story time itself, but then it comes up if you go to the library's YouTube list. And that might seem like, well, that's public, that's not a closed group. Still, it falls within fair use, because when we think about the 4 fair use questions we need to ask, these story times definitely fall into those fair use guidelines. Best practice also is thank the publisher, thank the author for permission, thank the illustrator. Share a link to where the book can be purchased when you're reading it, so that others can go in and buy it, because that's how these authors make money. That's how the publishers make money, is to then buy it, because that's the concern, right? Is that if we're sharing something online, well, then this person doesn't need to purchase it, right? So I think reading aloud almost has the opposite effect of, well, I don't need to buy it because it's on YouTube. No, you know, children want to reread books over and over again. So this is also, I think, a way to get books sold in the hands of the readers. Also, share your community purpose. That is another thing that I learned in the copyright webinar. That's really the biggest thing you can do. So your community purpose is the same, whether it's a virtual story time or a face-to-face story time. So that is copyright. And the elephant in the room is what I'm calling it. Here are a few more copyright resources. Library of Congress has a really great page. School Library Journal has a great page of resources. And Kate Mesner is an author, and she has created a page that has a lot of authors who are sharing information and illustrators who are sharing information. And there's also a page that she has set up that gives a list of publishers and their guidelines on fair use. So that's a really great resource. And then also, when you find a book that you want to read aloud, just Google the publisher's website and see what their specifications are, because each publisher is a little bit different, but it's not difficult, and it's important to still get those hands or get those readers listening to your books.
Hey, Mom.
And this is my 5-year-old.
Hello.
I need the devices in.
No, I do. Why don't you go talk to your daddy about that, okay? Go talk to your daddy about that. All right, sorry about that.
I'll be right back.
Okay, all right, we'll see you soon. So here are some other things. So that's the copyright. So let's say you're good, you've got your books, you've decided what you want to read, you've looked at the publisher's specifications, and now it's time to kind of set your stage. The picture here is from a blog, everydayreading.com. She is a former children's librarian and now has a blog about books and reading, but I thought this image was a really great example of kind of things you should think about. Have a clean background, have bright lighting, test it out first. So yesterday, for example, I did a story time on my phone for the first time. Usually I'm using my laptop, and so that already has like a large view, right? Well, on your phone, it gives you like a black like frame on either side if you have it vertical. So next time I need to do it horizontal. So you need to test it out first to make sure that you're not upside down, your book isn't backwards, all of that stuff. Introduce yourself each time. That way folks know who you are and where you work and where you're coming from. Speak loud and clear, and even better, use a microphone. I've seen some. I have a microphone at my house. You do. I've seen some examples of folks using like earbuds. You know, there's a lot of different microphones that you can buy. Aim your camera at eye level. You know, you don't want to like show under your chin. And you want to make sure you can see, again, in this photo, her camera is far enough back where you can see her, but you can also see the book and the illustrations. And of course, that's so important because that's one reason why you're reading aloud, right, is to show those illustrations and show that book. Be interactive. Pretend like it's an actual story time, that you have your audience in front of you. Ask them to sing a song with you. Ask them to get up and jump around. Ask their parents to be involved. Try to pretend that you're doing a story time like you always do. And then this is a great article from School Library Journal that was just posted yesterday. It's Virtual Storytime and Circle Time, 15 Tips to Make a Dynamic Video. And this author has excellent ideas on how to do virtual story time, and it's good tips to just remember for anything you do virtually.
You actually do crafts or associated crafts with the stories you choose. Is that correct?
I do. So again, you know, I've kind of thought about how I do a story time. So in a typical setting, when I do a story time, not a Cocky's Reading Express story time, but I'll do preschool story times, especially in the summer at our academic library on campus. And then in my past, I used to do preschool story times at my school when I was a school librarian for the little brothers and sisters who would come in. So my story times were not in a public library setting, but they were public library-esque story time. So what I would do is I would always start out with a song, and then we would read a book. Then I would do a finger play, and then I'd read another book, and then I might do something like a puppet show or a dance, and then I would do a craft that was themed with my story time. You don't have to theme it. No one says it's not like a story time rule to theme your story time, but I love a theme and it helps me with my inspiration and creativity. So for example, this week we're reading books about pigs. So we read a book, and then we do a pig craft, and then we have a pig snack. And that is something that I would also do at my preschool story time, is we'd have a craft, we'd have a snack, and then they would be able to check out books. So in a virtual story time plan, I've seen all kinds of things online. And again, I'm going to show you some places to go for inspiration and places I think are doing like really awesome virtual story times. But you can have your, introduce yourself and then sing a song and then read a book and then maybe do a dance and then sing another song and kind of wrap it up. I've seen some that are long, like a normal story time might be 30 to 45 minutes long, but I think virtually it's better to keep it short because it's, it is not the same as face-to-face, and it's just good, I think, to get those stories out there. But yes, I do a craft and I do a snack as well. and I give you inspirations for what you might have at your house. This is a little different. But these libraries that I have linked here are doing excellent work. You know, there are lots of libraries that are doing excellent work, but these are places that I've seen in particular that I think are doing awesome. Brooklyn Public Library Family, they have a great Facebook page, and I believe I can probably take you to it. Are you seeing it?
Excuse me.
No, we're still seeing your slides.
Okay, so I cannot take you to it, but you need to visit it when this is all over. So the Brooklyn Public Library Family page in New York is doing excellent family programming, infant story time, toddler story time. Lexington County Public Library here in South Carolina, they are doing interesting things. It's your regular story time, but they're doing it virtually. And they are still, you know, the library is closed to patrons, but there's a schedule in place where essential employees are still going in. And of course, some of those essential employees are the children's librarians. So they're filming their story time, and it's in their regular story time room, which I think is great because that's really familiar to the kids who are regulars. Because all you public librarians know that your story time folks, they're regulars. They come every week. So those kiddos are really missing you. So this is a little side note to say, if you are thinking to yourself, you know, there are lots of libraries already doing story time. There's lots of authors doing story time. I think that's something that I'm going to take off of my to-do list. I encourage you to go ahead and think about doing one once a week, once a month, once every other week, just so that those kids that are your regulars see your face and hear your voice, because they really come to love their story ladies. Richland Library in Columbia, South Carolina, is also doing amazing things. They are not in their spaces in these story times. They are in a variety of locations. Maybe they're outside, they're doing different things. So I've seen full story time with Richland Library. I've also seen where they're just doing little videos, maybe a quick song, nursery rhymes. And that's a cool thing too, in terms of copyright. You know, nursery rhymes, fairy tales, all of that is already open and public domain. So you can definitely do those little snippets of songs and poems and not necessarily worry too much. But I love that about Richland Library, that they're doing some really like short things. Community Library Network in Idaho, this children's librarian is doing amazing story times where she's added animation. She is just so inviting and interesting to watch. So I really recommend watching Community Library Network Storytime. And if you can't replicate it, at least share it out, because they really are very innovative and creative, I think. St. Catherine's Public Library in Ontario, one of the children's librarians at that library is the author of the School Library Journal article that I referred to in the last slide. She wrote the 15 tips, and she uses those 15 tips in her story time, so that's another great one to visit. The other two are also excellent. I tried to also include some that are not just in America. So I know that our audience is from all over. So those are just some really great places to visit for inspiration. And not that you have to do exactly what they're doing, but I think that's a good starting point. Some other programming ideas. So maybe you don't want to do a story time. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you're a teen librarian, a tween librarian, an adult librarian, and you story time is not necessarily where you want to go. Do things for your makerspace. There's a lot of great coding websites and apps that you can encourage your patrons and students to do that you don't need to be there face-to-face for. There are tutorials online. They can do it virtually. You can do a mask how-to. You can do things that I know a lot of times our maker spaces can be service oriented. So maybe we're making plarn blankets for the homeless, or we're doing something like, just something that we're trying to also provide a service. So maybe you create a makerspace and you teach your students how to create a mask, and then you send those to folks that need them. Offer challenges to your students and your parents. So, you know, just see how many books can you read while we're at home this week. Have them do things and then share a picture with you of what they're doing. There's a lot of different things you can do. Book talks, of course, that's something that we all always do. Tutorials about databases and productivity tools like Canva, some of the Adobe products that are free. This is a really great time to record these kinds of tutorials and then keep them and save them for later use, because this is the kind of thing that we do all the time as librarians. And then read alouds. Consider books. I love you too, baby. Other than picture books. So try a graphic novel. I know Dr. Gavigan was on Tuesday, so maybe try to read one of those that she suggested. Incorporate nonfiction. Incorporate books for your beginning readers. Have dance parties. This is a really fun thing that I've seen is dance parties. So share your playlist ahead of time, because it's really hard to hear when you're playing music in the background, but then like recording it. So share your playlist and then just kind of have like a virtual dance party. You know, a lot of libraries do baby wearing dance parties for baby story time. So incorporate that just to have fun during all of this.
I don't like baby.
I know. You can do trivia nights or trivia afternoons. My 5-year-old wants me to tell you all that she does not like babies, which is a good thing because we don't have any here.
I only like toy babies.
She just likes toy babies.
But I don't like mine or cute voices like my cousin.
I know. I know. So virtual tasting. So I put this because I've seen, you know, for adult programming, I've seen people who are doing virtual beer tastings and things like that. But you can do, you know, what's your favorite snack during this time? You can have things where they are interacting with each other and still just kind of having fun, because we know in our programming that a lot of times it's not necessarily what we're doing in those programs, but it's the social aspect of it. So we're missing that right now, right? So doing these virtual tastings and things that they can do kind of collaboratively with different software is kind of fun, and things that I've seen happening. Movie and popcorn watch along. So, you know, use your apps, Hoopla and different things that you have to stream a movie, or just pick a movie on Netflix or something. Everybody watches at the same time and pops popcorn and just watches it together. Puppet shows are really easy with digital, you know, using apps like Go Ink is a great green screen app. But puppet shows are super easy on the computer because now, you know, you have an instant like puppet stage with your camera on your computer. So puppet shows are great to do, and virtual game nights. I've seen, we have a great local gaming store here locally, and I believe that they're doing some virtual game nights. So just some great programming ideas that I've seen. First Chapter Friday. This is a great, again, if you're still concerned about the copyright aspect, just read the first chapter of a book to get readers interested, and then it can be something they check out when we're able to open again, or even see if it's available as an ebook somewhere. 2 for Tuesday. So if you like, you know, this one book, maybe you'll like this one, just to do a little book talk. A Throwback Thursday, so maybe introduce a book that is a classic, or introduce a book that people really loved a couple of years ago but needs to be boosted again. Coloring contest. This link goes to the Museum Color Our Collections website, where is museums that have put up coloring pages that's artwork, but in a coloring format, in a coloring sheet format, so that you can color it. So do things like that, and then have a contest, and people can vote on Facebook. Whoever gets the most likes wins. And I've already kind of shared this one, but interact online with your patrons. Again, that's what we're missing, is the social aspect of all of our programming. So ask for them to share comments, ask for them to share pictures of crafts they're making, programs they've participated in. There's still ways to get our patrons involved. Some Facebook groups to join. People are sharing. They are doing an awesome job of not only creating programs virtually for people, but sharing what they're doing. And so you don't have to recreate the wheel. This is a really stressful time. So if you don't want to do a story time, you don't have the motivation to do something or a different kind of program, see what else others are doing. And I think a lot of folks are more than happy for you to share their read aloud or use their program idea. So these are just some groups that I'm a part of. You know, there are lots and lots of Facebook groups out there, but I think these are the ones that kind of share the most information. For me personally, Storytime Underground is great for public librarians, for youth services librarians, and school librarians. Learning librarians is more school library focused, and I think that's something to think about too, because as school librarians, there's a lot we can be doing. We could be, you know, whatever kind of lesson you are going to do in your library, whatever kind of event you are going to host in April, go ahead and still try to do it virtually. April is Poetry Month, so I know in my school library I always had lots of things going on for Poetry Month. There's still a lot you can do virtually. There's different apps you can incorporate, lots of different ways to get people still involved in your programs. Future Ready Librarians is another one that's more school library, but I think public librarians can get a lot out of it as well. Library Step Up is a new group that has started during the pandemic, and it's just a great resource and interesting to see what other libraries are doing in terms of giving services to folks who need them that can't get them right now. So for example, Wi-Fi has been you know, expanded so that folks can come to parking lots and whatnot to get Wi-Fi on their computers. Some libraries are using like school feeding spots. You know, we still have to feed children who school was the only way they were getting fed, right? So there are lots of places that are, lots of libraries that are including books at those feeding sites. And so a lot of that sort of sharing is being done in this Library Step Up Facebook group. And then the Programming Librarian Interest group is sharing some really wonderful things. All of these groups are great now, but I've also always enjoyed following them for information and ideas. And this is my contact information. So on my website, valeriebyrd4.com, you can find all of my social media links to follow me. You can find me in normal life at the South Carolina Center for Community Literacy on the campus of the University of South Carolina right now. You can find me at my home, but that's me, and that is my presentation about reading aloud and programming, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. If you want, you can, I think you should have, I think it's a circle up in the upper right where you can close down the slides unless you want them to still be up. Ah, there we go. Hi. Oh, but you're now muted, I think.
Hello.
Hello again. Thank you. Really interesting. So I'm wondering if you can walk us through a couple of things. One project that I thought was really interesting was the fact that you did do story time in an academic library over the summer.
Yeah.
Right. And while I'm sure you had lots of physics and humanities professors sitting in a circle crisscross applesauce, that obviously wasn't the purpose. Can you give us a little bit of thinking about what was the thinking that went into it, and what did you hope to get out of it?
Sure. So I did story time last summer, and I intend to do it I guess the summer we'll see what the limits are. I guess, next time we are in person, I plan to continue it. It is going to be an ongoing event, a summer thing. So my idea to start it was because during the summer, there's a lot of children on campus. Faculty and staff sometimes bring their children to work. And so to me, it was something that I wanted to do as a service to the university and for folks who have their children there. Also, the campus is beautiful, and even if you are not a student, you are not a faculty or staff member, our campus is just a place to go a lot of times for the horseshoe and all kinds of things. So they are open to the public, and so that's just, it was a service mostly for faculty and staff, but really just for fun, and because there are children on campus, and so I wanted to offer something for them to do.
Very cool. So putting on, because you've had experience in youth services in public libraries and in school libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So putting that on for a moment, talk to me as a school librarian. Story time tends to be obviously elementary, younger folks. Talk to me about how those kind of read aloud and story time functions might link into what's going on in classrooms. So teacher collaborations, things of that nature.
So in normal world, as a school librarian, when you're doing a read aloud, or when I would do a read aloud, I would always ask my teachers, what's going on in your classroom, or if I found a really great book that I knew would go with one of their standards, I would say, hey, can I read this to your students? I was on a flexible schedule, so they weren't necessarily coming in at the same time every week. A lot of times in elementary school in particular, the school librarian is a part of the specials. So they come.
Mom, how many more days until
It's on Sunday, baby, 4 days. So the students, my students would not come in as part of a related arts. I was not necessarily the person that they would have like their planning while the kids were with me. So I was really lucky in that I could do collaborative read alouds. So it's a little different in a school library because it's not necessarily always for fun. I think in a public library, your focus is on enjoyment and entertainment and sharing great books and family literacy. In a school setting, it's more being tied to those academic standards. So I wouldn't necessarily do a craft. I would do something like, now I just read you this great book about owls. So now let's go to this online encyclopedia and see what information we can find about owls, and let's write a nonfiction story about owls using this app or whatever. So it would tie in more to the classroom. That was in a regular environment. I think now we can even continue to do those things. I put myself in my own shoes a few years ago in a school library, and if I were in this situation right now, again, this would be a time when I would be doing lots of things with my teachers. So I always did a big Harlem Renaissance unit with my 5th graders, and it's something that could definitely tie in virtual. And I would read the stories. I would read the same stories. Oh, you do? Excuse me, I need to text. Okay.
We could do, actually, let's start story time by text. That could be interesting.
Yes, you could do that too. Go see Daddy, okay? He's coming, bub. So I lost my train of thought. So I would still do the same read alouds with my 5th graders that I would use in that lesson, and then even encourage them to do the same extension activities. So for example, we did an art lesson with Harlem Renaissance. So I would still read the same book about the artists and then have them create their own works of art at home, but make it optional because not everyone is going to have those supplies at home, right? So
we can always ask her what she likes about story time. That might be interesting. Get the 5-year-old perspective. So part of what the other thing that you teach, and once again, thank you for taking this time. Part of the other thing you teach is book selection, the idea of making sure that for collection development, etc. Talk to me about what makes a good book. What's the process for picking one for story time?
So for story time and for anything really, so this is like what I think about with Cocky's Reading Express. Our program is read alouds, and when we are selecting the books for our read alouds, we make sure that they're colorful because the illustrations are also important. We make sure that they're entertaining, the story is fun. We make sure they're diverse, and I think that's something that is really important to think about right now because some of us are using the books we might have around. We are using the books that we remember to grab off the shelves. We need to make sure that we are still sharing diverse authors, diverse characters, diverse topics. And I think that's something that's really important when you're selecting books for reading aloud or just for using in a classroom. So you just that's really what you do. you find a good read aloud, one that's good, it's entertaining, it's got a good story, it might have something that you can do along with it, it invites interaction with others, and then that it's diverse.
So final question, and then let you get back to being a human being. Tell us a little bit. So you mentioned Cocky's Reading Express, and not everyone in the audience or watching this recording is going to know what Cocky's Reading Express is. But the reason I ask is because to me it's a fabulous connection between what a university can do, what a school library can do, and what a public library can do. So can you just quickly give us a description of what that program is?
Okay, so Cocky's Reading Express is a program where we go into schools. During the school year, we visit schools. During the summer, we visit public libraries. We bring daycares to us often. We visit summer camps. So we go to a number of different environments, and we have a bus. We travel the state, and university students are my volunteers. And so on the bus, on the way to wherever we are going, I instruct them on how to do a good read aloud. So I select the books that we read, and then I share with them how to do a good read aloud, because it's not, you can't just stand and read the book and not show the pictures. You have to be loud and clear. So I share that on the way to wherever we're going, and then they read the books to the people that we are visiting, the kids we are visiting. We typically read 5 books. On our third book, Cocky surprises everyone, and so I mentioned before that Cocky is a giant rooster, and he is very well loved in the state of South Carolina, and so the kids get very excited that he's there, and he acts out the books for us. At the end of our program, our call to action is for kids to promise Cocky that they will read every single day. So that we get everyone in the room to say that at the same time, and then they are able to get a book to take home, and it's theirs to keep, because building that home library is very important. Book ownership is a really big deal. So they each get a copy of a book to keep, and that's what happens at a visit. It looks a little different depending on where we go. That's what I just described is a typical school visit and a typical public library visit. When we visit over the summer, we've done other things as well. Sometimes just me and Cocky will go somewhere and do a story time to a smaller group of students. And he did make an appearance at my academic library story time last summer, and I'm sure he'll come back again, because we did a couple of story times where he was the main attraction, I guess. Our university had a great exhibit of comic books, and so I did a story time on Parents Weekend with Cocky, and he was like super cocky for because it was comic books. So that's Cocky's Reading Express.
That's fabulous. Valerie, Byrd, thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing this, and I really appreciate it. I know that a lot of people are interested in one, occupying and connecting with communities now, but even moving forward. So really appreciate your time. Thank you all very much for joining us. We'll have the archive up hopefully today, and once again, the slides and links will be available to you. And we hope you'll join us next week on Tuesday and Thursday. We're going to be talking about libraries in Ireland, and we're going to be talking about augmented reality and using those kinds of technologies in academic libraries. So thank you all again. Thanks, Valerie. Please thank your co-presenter, and talk to you soon.
Great.